Hey, and welcome back to Game Talk. I'm your host, Em, and beyond today I'm joined by Connor.
Hey, guys.
And Mike.
Hello.
And the big thing on my mind today is The Last of Us, right? So The Last of Us has started airing on HBO. Episode 2 just aired this past Sunday. And we have talked about video game adaptations in the past, but I do think it is worth revisiting the subject because, my God, they're absolutely knocking it out of the park. Like I've discussed this with a few of my friends, but like even to non-watchers of this show, which by the way there are non-players of this show, right? People who didn't play the game or watching the show, of which there are many, right? This is reaching a really wide audience. It really is apparent that so much love and passion went into crafting every inch of this world. Like it exudes that from every frame, every shot, every line of dialogue, and I think a big reason as to why it's seeing success, right? Obviously, it's a very good show, it's a good story, great casting, but above all, it respects the source material, which is not something that happens quite often with video game adaptations. At least I feel that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think the closest ever is The Witcher, which isn't even really a video game adaptation. It's more of a book adaptation. And also, it stopped respecting the source material halfway through and is much worse for it.
And that is actually the exact reason why Henry Cavill left. Did you know that?
Yeah, well, yeah. He kind of got forced out because he tried to get it back on track, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, and there was literally something in his like contract where it was just like, hey, if this stops following the source material, because Henry Cavill is a huge fan of The Witcher, like the books and the games. It was like, if this stops following the source material, I do not want to be Geralt anymore. And so then they had a creative falling out because the show wanted to do their own thing and veer off in another direction. So Henry Cavill quit, and at the same time, James Gunn took over the DC, and he didn't get to be Superman either, so he kind of just got shafted.
He'll be fine.
He's Henry Cavill. He'll be fine. Yeah.
They'll need a strong guy. They'll need a strong jawline somewhere in Hollywood.
Right. Exactly. But you know, like, I do dislike the argument, and I have seen this a few times already, that this is the first great video game adaptation. It absolutely is not. Right. But what this is, I believe, is the first great direct adaptation of a video game story. And but what I mean by that is, you know, like, obviously we've talked about things like Arcane and Sonic the Hedgehog, like these Detective Pikachu, these highly successful movies based on the games, based on, you know, characters that exist in the games, based off of lore in the games. But, you know, Arcane is not adapting League of Legends story, right?
Right.
Sonic the Hedgehog is not adapting Sonic Adventure.
I also think Arcane is really
yet,
the only one good enough to be in the same arena as...
I agree.
Yeah.
Arcane... I think Arcane and The Last of Us are now in rarefied air.
Yeah.
But, like, the difference between Arcane and The Last of Us is that The Last of Us is almost slavishly an adaptation of the game story, to the point where entire lines of dialogue are lifted straight from the game and uttered by these actors. And let me tell you, as someone who has loved this story for over 10 years now, it is so surreal seeing actors like Pedro Pascal like speak lines that I've heard for, you know, the better part of a decade now. It is surreal. And I could not be happier as a fan of the games and as a fan of good TV. Like, and I think you said it better, Connor, as someone who's more lukewarm on the game but seemingly really likes the show. Like, this was made to be a television show.
No, so
like,
that kind of goes into the point I wanted to make in this episode personally, is my problem with The Last of Us has always kind of been that I thought it would be better as a series or a show. Like, some of the gaminess that's not in the show, the story's stronger for it and stuff. Like, you know, the show doesn't have to have a combat encounter every couple minutes so the player doesn't get bored. There's no silly puzzles that Joel is solving on screen and stuff. I think all of that kind of weakened the story in the game. And I also just, like, there's a certain thing that Naughty Dog was trying to do with The Last of Us, or at least it felt like to me. This is a personal taste thing. But I don't like when media acts like a live action movie or TV series is like the pinnacle you can strive to be. But The Last of Us always kind of felt like it was that to me. Like it desperately wanted to be more than a video game, when what I want is something that is so happy to be a video game. And that's why I really like The Last of Us. I think lukewarm is even a little unfair. I just don't put it in the greatest games of all time because it doesn't feel like it wants to be a video game to me. And that is why I'm loving this series so much. I guess almost ironically is that like this felt like a series that wanted so badly to be in this format, and now it is, and it's just amazing for it.
So I do kind of I can kind of see where you're coming from in respects to the first game, but I didn't play the second game, so. Right? You haven't played the second game. I keep telling you how good the gameplay is in that game.
Well, it's not on PC yet, so
it will.
Yeah, it will be.
Okay, so that leads us to another point, right? So The Last of Us, when it premiered on HBO, it was their biggest premiere in like a decade or so, other than House of Dragon, of course, because obviously Game of Thrones has taken over the world. I think episode 1 has already been viewed by over like 10, 15 million people in the US alone.
I was going to say it was over 18 million worldwide, I think.
18 million worldwide, okay. And the viewership increase between episode 1 and episode 2 is the highest increase in HBO history.
Wow.
So this show is massive, like massive to the extent that like people at work are going to be talking about this like they talked about Game of Thrones.
No, it's affecting me emotionally in a way that the game didn't, at least. Although part of that I do wonder, and I think you and I talked about this, is that I was like a teenager when I played The Last of Us the first time.
Yeah, I was, let me think. I was maybe 18.
Well, what year was it? Was it 2013 or 2014?
It was 2013.
2013?
Yes.
So I would have been like 16, I think.
Yeah. And maybe it is a bit cheap to say this, but like I really do think that, you know, as an older person, you can appreciate the story more. And I believe that'll, you know, like if we ever decide to have kids, then I believe the story will probably hit in an entirely different way. Because I can like empathize with like being a father or whatever, but I don't understand what that's like, you know? Like, I know it probably is very emotional, but like, you know,
I'm also
I
just
can't
like
feel that yet.
I'm looking for a different thing in a story now than I was when I was 16. Like,
right, yeah.
the heart-wrenching moments. I'm like, when I was 16, it was important to me to not feel anything when I saw stuff like that. You know, like you're kind of edgy and stuff. And now, like, as an adult,
you want to cry. You want something to make you.
I want to feel it.
Something.
Yeah.
No, like 16-year-old me thought God of War 3 was the most epic story of all time.
No, I was convinced like Battlefield 3 was one of the best games ever made, and like, yeah.
I mean, like God of War 3 was just like a giant murder spree.
Yeah.
That's all God of War 3 was. And you contrast that with what God of War is today, you know, it's like almost it almost is like perfect in the sense that like that game came out, 3 came out at the exact right time in my life, and then Reboot and Ragnarok came out when I was mature enough to appreciate that kind of story. But, you know, The Last of Us, you know, like, it is weird in a sense for me, because I literally, like, there are show original scenes, right? And which we'll get to that in a minute, but, like, to me, it's like I've already watched it, almost, to an extent. Right? And it's all like I'm almost waiting for the moment to come where it's just like, okay, that wasn't as good as the game. And obviously there are people online complaining about certain scenes being superior in the game, but as far as I'm concerned, like everything has been elevated so far. Like Joel, Ellie, their banter, just the world itself, like obviously graphically it was beautiful on PS3 at the time. It's graphically beautiful on PS5 in the remake, but it looks like they literally just I don't know how they did their set design,
it's
but
insane
it's
how
so
real
gorgeous.
It looks. Yeah,
it actually just looks like they're walking through an actual ruined city.
Yeah, it's,
you know, like every single shot, and it's like that hotel's half submerged in water. It's like, what did it take to build a set like that? Like I don't know. Like it's just the design, the production is crazy on this thing.
It's extremely immersive. Yeah, the thing that's been surprising me as I watch it is how, like, for a game that I have kind of in a contrarian way ragged on a good bit, even though I like it. But I remember the story of The Last of Us shockingly well. Like, I saw the episode
it's a very
title.
memorable story.
Yeah, I saw the episode title and I immediately knew every plot beat that was going to happen in this episode.
Yeah, no, I was kind of getting to that point earlier and I got sidetracked, right? But like, yeah, for episode 1, I knew exactly what was going to happen and even like really pretty well guessed where it would end. Same with episode 2. I was just like, okay, we're going to start talking about spoilers now. So if you haven't played the game and you're interested in the show, I would suggest stopping here and going to watch the show. But like, I was like, episode 2 is going to end with Tessa's death, of course, right? Like, where else would they end it? And that's exactly where it ended, right?
Yeah.
So like, I already have like, even in terms of like the episode to episode, like the story beats, I already anticipate pretty well.
No, I do wonder some things though about what they're going to do, because like they have shown that Joel is a killer and stuff, but like by this point in the game, Joel has killed many human beings on screen.
So there have been, a few changes, and I think all for the better, right? So like Fedra were the ones who came and killed Tess,
right?
Where episode 2 ended. They changed that to be a horde of infected, and I think it was a more appropriate change, one, story-wise. Like, it didn't really make sense for Fedra to be that far outside of the quarantine zone, and 2, it was just more of a highlight. Like, this was the episode to show how dangerous the infected can be.
I agree.
Especially with, like, the clickers and everything like that. So I think that was a superior change.
It just makes me wonder. I agree. I think it was a good change, but it does make me wonder, for the future, are they going to pull their punches with how...
I really don't think so, because I think the whole zombie apocalypse thing in The Last of Us is just set dressing, right?
Yeah.
The Last of Us is ultimately about how horrible and dark people can be, but at the end of it, like, there is humanity left. There is something worth fighting for. There is hope to cling on to. That's what I truly believe The Last of Us is about, right? And to show that dark side of humanity, like, we're obviously, like, I would even go so far as to predict that, like, we saw most of the infected for the season, like, in this episode. And we're going to be primarily dealing with humans going forward.
That's probably true, because it would be kind of boring to have a bunch. Like, the clicker sections were very fun in the game, but, like... No, that's not true. When we get to... Is it Bobby? Is that his name?
Bill.
When we get to Bill, we're going to get a lot of infected,
Bill,
I feel like.
who is played by Nick
Yeah, that's going to be so good.
Which is just... the most incredible casting decision I've ever seen.
Oh my god, yeah, the preview for next week was immaculate.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing Bill, and like Ellie's whole thing with Bill, how they're constantly at each other's throats, which, by the way, like, I've noticed, like, the show is funnier than the game, right? Like, obviously both are very bleak, but the moments of levity in the show have really got me. Like, Ellie's quip, when like she asked for a gun, and then she was just like, "Oh, I guess I'll throw my effing sandwich at them then."
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. Like, that wasn't a line in the game.
I thought that was a line straight out of the game. That's how well it fit.
Was show original, yeah.
Because I do remember Ellie complaining about not having a gun a lot in the game.
She did, until, obviously character development happens and Joel trusts her with a gun.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, like, that's what you get when you have Neil Druckmann, who was the writer of the original Last of Us game, right? As one of the 2 co-showrunners, which, by the way, like, Neil Druckmann's, like, he's the man. Like, look at this guy's come up, right? He started as a software engineer at Naughty Dog, and now he's directing episodes on HBO.
Yeah.
Like, and not only that, right? Like, he's, like, obviously created some of the great games of all time, like Uncharted 2, The Last of Us, etc. Like, so kudos to this man. He's had an insane career.
I am so upset. Like, seeing the Uncharted movie could not have been as good as The Last of Us show, even under ideal circumstances. But knowing that there was this kind of passion afoot, and they let the Tom Holland Uncharted movie happen,
here's
so
the thing
upsetting.
With Uncharted, right? Uncharted actually filmed like many, many years ago, right? And it was kind of in production hell for a while. But Uncharted started filming before PlayStation Productions was formed. And PlayStation Productions is kind of the team that manages the cross-media, like, translation from game to, like, movie or television show or something. I hope the fact that now we have PlayStation productions, Uncharted 2 will be a lot more like the game.
Oh, it'll be just like the games where the first one's not that good.
Right, yeah. But like that being said, I don't know how much you could salvage when you've got like Tom Holland. Okay, Tom Holland's one thing, but Mark Wahlberg, I'm sorry. Like I always got
just don't. No, there will be no Mark tears Wahlberg, for a complete reboot.
Yeah, no, please, yeah. Or maybe, yeah, it's a little soon. But that's the annoying thing. Uncharted still did really well as a movie. So like it or not, yes, it did. It exceeded all of their expectations.
That's so upsetting.
It is upsetting. So Mark Wahlberg is going to be Sully for the foreseeable future.
Do you think they'll do sequels? Oh, yeah, they will. Successful movies always get sequels.
Oh, yeah. Uncharted 2 is 100% happening. And like obviously Tom Holland is like one of the biggest actors in Hollywood now. Like, and Sony basically owns it.
Tom Holland's fine. I'm not that upset about Tom Holland being Drake. That's fine.
I think Tom Holland could like grow into that role.
Yeah.
Which is weird to say because he's like a 25-year-old man, right? But like I do think he's still a little young to be Drake.
Well, I mean, Drake's not 25 in the games, is he? He's in his 30s.
He's like in his early 30s, yeah. But like, and plus, like if you had the right like 25-year-old, some people seem older than they are. Tom Holland definitely has kind of like a baby face and a baby voice. I mean, like no offense or whatever.
I would feel like a young Nathan Drake, like
yeah, perfect young Nathan Drake actually. Yeah.
So
but, there's just that level. I don't even want to say maturity because it almost sounds insulting, but like that level of like just I guess gruffness and
grizzled,
slightly older grizzledness. Yeah, that Tom Holland sort of lacks at least right now. But yeah, I digress. But yeah, back to The Last of Us, right? So I also wanted to highlight that one was Neil Druckmann, right? Obviously, we've got the man behind the series, who wrote the series and directed the second game, right? And then on the other hand, the other showrunner is Craig Mazin, who created one of the best series I've seen on HBO, Chernobyl. I don't know if you've seen it, Connor, but Chernobyl is a masterpiece, and it details the harrowing events of the nuclear reactor meltdown at Chernobyl.
I have not seen that. I've heard very good things.
Yeah, I would totally recommend checking it out. And what's amazing is like when you put these two people together, you get what The Last of Us is, and you can see the clear influence of both in this show. Like, for example, the opening to the first episode, that talk show where they were talking about like, okay, cordyceps fungi, like it doesn't affect humans, but what if in the future, the temperature rises for some reason they might have to adapt to such a thing, like that creeping feeling of unease and dread in a conversation, right? Like, and another example, again, like episode 2, how it started in Jakarta, right? Totally show original scene. And they consult this fungus expert, and her conclusion is to bomb the city, right? And she requests to be taken to her family so she can spend some last time with them. Like that slow rising dread in a scene is what Chernobyl does so well. And both of those scenes, right, had Craig Mazin all over it. And like totally felt like they were straight ripped out of Chernobyl. So when you take that and mix it with The Last of Us, it's like a perfect fit, right? Like you take that horror, that dread, and like that emotional storytelling and put it all in the blender, and it just works. Yeah.
I'll also say like it is a much better time now for The Last of Us to be out. When The Last of Us the game came out in 2014, I'm not excited for another zombie apocalypse to explore at all. It had been done to death over the past like 5 years with like Zombieland and the Walking Dead, and World War Z I think had come out recently or was about to come out.
Yeah, zombie media was very hot back in the day, and I would argue that The Last of Us kind of stands out even among those. But I think you're right in the sense that like a re-release today, this is the perfect time to release it because for a few factors, right? One, The Walking Dead finally ended a few weeks ago.
Finally.
So whatever you think of that show, and I've never actually watched a single episode of that show, but whatever you think about it, right? Like, it was a massive zombie show, right? And it's finally over. So there's definitely kind of like a niche for that, a similar kind of post-apocalyptic zombie show that opened up, right, after that show ended. And two, right, we are coming off of the heels of a global pandemic. Obviously, it's not as severe what happened in The Last of Us, but at least we have a little bit of context now. Like, everyone has a little bit of context as to what, like, a pandemic even looks like, right?
Yeah, it also, like, some of that stuff was just not that believable back in the day, because I don't know, I guess a lot of people thought, like, oh, it would never get that bad, people would be able to keep it under control and stuff, and, like, no, they wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, like, everyone was
that bad.
Everyone in the entire world got infected in, like, you know, a year or so.
Yeah.
So, which is, you know, harrowing to think about if you apply it to, you know, The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and you know what's crazy? What makes The Last of Us so creepy, and I'm glad they're sort of leaning into this in the show, is that, you know, cordyceps fungi are real, right? Like, they actually do control ants, like zombies, right?
Right.
Like, they invade the ant's body, they control it, they can have it move around, eat whatever they want, or whatever. And when they're done with it, they kill the ant, and then the spores, the fungus actually, like, grows out of its head and releases its spores for more ants. It's like a horrifying way to die, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, The Last of Us is science fiction, but it's science fiction in that, like, it's only a couple steps away from a potential reality, which makes it so scary, right? Like, cordyceps is a real fungus, right? A real fungus that infects insects. It cannot infect humans, right? Because of the temperature difference, right? It would die inside of a human host at that high temperatures. But what if global warming is a factor and that fungus has to adapt to survive? What if it mutates, right? What if it mutates to withstand temperatures above, like, 100 degrees? Then what happens, you know? Like, your mind kind of races thinking about that sort of thing. And that angle was present in the games as well, right? The same fungus, it was cordyceps. But they really leaned into that aspect in that show, kind of making it, you know, more believable that something like this could happen. And I think that really amps up the horror elements of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Mike, you should watch the show.
I might. I don't really want to pay for another subscription service.
That is fair.
We can.
There's a lot of good stuff on HBO.
Offline. Yeah, there is a lot of good stuff on HBO.
Harley
Plus,
Quinn.
we can probably hook you up.
A bunch of the DC shows are actually kind of fun. Peacemaker, is that his name? Peacekeeper, Peacemaker, whatever, the John Cena show.
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing is, like, you know, with the merger with Time Warner, right? The new head of HBO, or the new head of the company, whatever you want to call him, Zaslav. He's not a big fan of a lot of things, right? A lot of cancellations.
Not a fan of any
like
animation. It seems
not
like.
a fan of animation, apparently, right? So,
well,
I would, yeah.
That's
that's
another thing. I just want to
good,
say, like,
but
my point I was making about video games aspiring to be a live action show. I feel that way about other media too. Be the media be the media you are. Like, don't make. I hate it when something gets made just so that it can later be adapted into a live action movie. There's a comic writer who's famous for that. Is Mark Millar, I believe, is his name, and he makes some miserable, terrible comics because he has no intention of making a good comic. He just wants to make something that'll be adapted into a pretty good movie later.
See, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, you have to be good for other people to want to
it gets
adapt
adapted into
right?
movies all the time, though. Like,
That's weird.
Kick-Ass was him.
Oh, okay.
The Kick-Ass comics are terrible.
I mean, I agree with your argument, but I don't think The Last of Us was
The Last of Us was not miserable. It was trying to be a live action movie, though. Like, or at least that's what it was emulating very strongly.
It was emulating that very strongly, but once again, I will make the argument that game really shines on the hardest difficulty. Like, once you play it on that difficulty, like, clickers can hear you reload, like, every bullet actually counts. Like, you'd probably have to reload your save if you wasted a couple shots, you know, like, it feels like a desperate struggle for survival. And I do think that's how the game is meant to be played. Now, obviously, you know, like, not everyone wants to subject themselves to that sort of gameplay, but and I do think the show actually captures The Last of Us, like, on the hardest difficulty really well, because like the hardest difficulty on The Last of Us, you take a gunshot or two and you're dead, right? Like, if you reload your gun with a clicker around, you're dead, right? Like, you actually have to be completely silent. You have to be stealthy. You have to be very careful. You have to make sure you open every single drawer and get all of the resources you can, because you really do use all of them on that difficulty. There's no waste.
I also want to say, this made me think of this, like the clickers like scene in the newest episode. It was very refreshing to see intense action in a big budget like production with no stupid one-liners or quips in a show that is capable of one-liners and quips. Like,
yeah, I mean, they treated that goes back to what I said before about treating your source material with respect, right? Like, that felt like an intense struggle for survival, right? Like, one misstep there and they were all dead, right? And one of them actually did die, you know? So
there was one misstep,
yeah. So, like,
actually two.
And I do have to give another shout out to the clickers themselves, right?
Oh my god!
So the clickers, for those who don't know, are infected who have progressed to a stage where, like, basically the fungus is growing out of their face and they can't see anymore. So they use these weird clicking sounds as a sort of echolocation to hear their prey, right? So when they go into this building, they have to be totally silent, right? Which obviously in itself creates a sense of tension and horror. But, like, when you see one of these things, you know, you see its face, it looks like it was ripped straight out of the game. And in post-show interviews and stuff, they say all of this was practical, right? Like, there was no CGI involved. All of that was, like, makeup and prosthetics, which is just wild to me. Like, it looked so incredibly real, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, they hired fans of the game who mastered the clicker sounds and movement to play the clickers in The Last of Us TV show. Yes.
Well, they nailed it. It was...
Yeah. So, like, they were... those actors were actually making those clicking sounds and actually moving in that, like, disjointed, very kind of jarring way. Like, I guess, you know, fans of the game, some of them practiced being a clicker and it paid off, which is really strange.
Yeah, that's...
good for them. Yeah.
What a weird age we live in.
I know, right? But, you know, so 2 episodes have aired as of the time of this recording out of 9, right? And originally, you know, like, HBO seasons are traditionally 10 episodes, right? But they combined the original, like, episode 1 and 2, they cut that together. So that's why episode 1 was, like, extra long, right? So, in effect, episode 1 was episodes 1 and 2. So, 9 episodes. And, man, like, knowing what's coming, right? Like, I'm very excited to see things like, you know, they're meeting with Sam and Henry and their journey through the sewers, you know, because, like, that ends in tragedy, obviously, and, like, the cannibals, right, in winter. Wonder how that's going to translate.
Yeah, because that part of the game, that's the part of the game I remember feeling the most, because I think very intentionally it felt really long. Like,
yeah, and especially because that was when Ellie was separated from Joel, and you were just sort of fending for yourself.
Yeah, and it was very difficult. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, I could not be happier with his adaptation. You know, like, any fears or worries I had totally melted away a few minutes into the episode, right? Like, the actors are perfectly casted, right? Like, Joel, Ellie, Tess, Tommy, like, oh my god, especially Tommy, right? Like, you hear his voice on the phone and it sounds exactly like the actor from the game, like, to a T. And it's not him, right? Like, it's a Jeffrey Pierce is the guy in the game, and Diego Luna is the actor in the show, and they just sound like the same dude. It's crazy. The same, like, way of speaking, the same, like, voice. It's eerie almost.
Yeah, Pedro Pascal is also nailing Joel, like, voice-wise.
He is, yeah. Pedro Pascal's stocks have gone so high.
Yeah.
Like lately, like obviously he was really he was a fan favorite in Game of Thrones.
I didn't even know he was
he's
in
in Holly. Yeah, he was. Yeah,
I haven't
he
seen
was
it.
he's in Hollywood movies, and now I do think like this will be his big role. Like I think when all is said and done, like this is Pedro Pascal as Joel is going to be like likened to things like Bryan Cranston playing Walter White in Breaking Bad and stuff like that. So
I could see that. I think it's a bold. I don't think you're wrong on any level. I just think it's a bold take to be like
it is very
there
bold,
while something, because like nobody while it was on was going to be able to tell what a cultural touchstone Breaking Bad was going to be. I feel like
that's true, but like
at least I could.
I'm basing that on the sort of like viewership information we have.
Yeah,
right, and the trajectory from 1 to 2, right? Like this is going viral, no pun intended, right? But like it's going to be big, like people who don't play video games at all are watching this thing, which I guess was the intended effect of this show, right? Like the show was made for two audiences, one who played the game and one who didn't, right? The people who didn't get to see like a really harrowing journey in a post-apocalyptic world. People who play the game get to see that too, but they get to see all the little nods to people who play the game that you would only understand if you play the game. Like little things like Tess asking Joel to boost her up, right? Like that didn't have to be in the show. That was just a little nod to the video games, because that happens a lot in the video games to the point where it's a little silly.
It's cartoonish, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a trope. Do you mind if I interject here to drop a nice hot take that we can argue about for a minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
I've gone out to see a lot of movies recently, in the past like 6 months. And I can confidently say that the best experiences are not in theaters and haven't been for a while now. The Last of Us is better than any movie I've seen in the past year, probably, maybe longer.
So
by a lot.
I would agree with you that television as a whole, I think, is better than movies as a whole now. I don't know if that was always the case. But, like, you get way more invested with TV.
It definitely didn't used to be the case.
I still will say I feel something special when I go see a movie in the theater.
I hate going to a theater.
Every now and then I do get, like, a terrible experience, right? Because, like, the person next to me is, like, really annoying or whatever. By and large,
I mean...
And especially if you get, like, if you find, like, an empty theater all to yourself, that's just, like, I don't know. There's something magical to me about that still.
I granted I am a special case. I've spent a good bit of money on my home theater, but everything from audio quality to visual quality to comfort of the chair to ability to pause when I need to go to the bathroom is better at home. There's zero benefit to me going to a theater. Every single aspect of it is worse in my opinion.
If I'm trying to look at what you're saying objectively, I think you're probably right. There's just that really strong nostalgia factor in me. And I think in a lot of people who
I think that's a fair
going to the movies, which, is not a good thing, right? Because for the longevity of theaters, right? Because when the current generation of kids grows up, I don't know if there will be movie theaters because
that's the thing. I wouldn't have a problem with theaters if their current death groan wasn't so annoying to me, because they are dying. They're not going to be around in 20 years. I genuinely don't think you can reasonably expect that. But their death groan right now as they're going is like, oh, we've got to make movies take longer to come to streaming, or we've got to delay all the release to DVD and Blu-ray because it's affecting box office sales. It's affecting box office sales because nobody wants to go to the theater. Like, figure out another profit model, because this is insane. Like,
almost ironically though, like much to the chagrin of film auteurs or whatever, it's things like Marvel that are keeping the film industry alive.
I know,
or the cinema industry.
That's the only reason I'm going. That's not the only reason I've gone to theaters for a few movies recently. But if I could just watch those movies at home, then I wouldn't be going to a theater, and I would pay the same price happily. Like, that's not the problem. It's just...
And there's obviously movies that are like lightning in a bottle, like Top Gun Maverick, like grossed over $1 billion because it was just a freaking incredible movie that both like capitalized on the nostalgia of people who watched Top Gun 1 like decades ago, as well as like just putting like a modern flair on it for younger audiences. That movie was awesome, right? But like those are like few and far in between if you're not like a franchise like Marvel or something like that.
I have such a problem with like the film auteurs you were talking about. Like James Cameron put out a statement recently that was like, he was saying you have to watch Avatar 2 in theaters. It's the way it needs to be experienced.
I can't stand James Cameron.
And then he says, like, I know you're sitting there and watching 8 hours of your series at home. Yeah, when I'm at home, I can take a break. I can go cook lunch. I can go pee. And he said, well, don't say you need to go pee. Just get up and go pee. Which means that he'd literally rather you miss, like, a few minutes of his movie.
Did you hear what he said right after that, though? He said, go pee because the second time you come watch my movie, you'll catch the scenes.
I didn't know that he said that. That got cut from the article. What a douchebag.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to go see that movie. Avatar 1 was boring, bored me to tears, so.
I'm also not seeing Avatar.
I might watch it once it's on streaming, but.
But, regardless of us, deciding to see it or not, Avatar: The Way of Water just is another one of those movies that's fighting against the death of the theater, right? This thing has grossed like $2.5 billion, which is just wild to me. Like,
did they not
obviously
learn?
Avatar 1 was like this whole phenomenon, right? But like, I think movies exist today that, look as good as that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the whole deal is, but whatever. Obviously, I'm in the minority there, but
I'm
I
just
mean, like,
pretty anti.
I know. There is like it's tough for me, right? Because like I really like leaning into being a 90s kid, right?
Yeah.
Like, and in the 90s, you went to the movie theater, right? Like, that's just what you did. And I love that, right? So even when I go today, I still feel that magic. But like you said, Connor, like the writing is on the wall. I do see it coming, and I don't like it, but I've accepted it because, like, I have a pretty sick setup at home too. You know, like
as sick or more
OLED
than mine.
TV.
Probably more than mine.
Yeah,
the sound system's pretty dope.
I think more than yours. Yeah. Wait, you've never even been to my house though.
I think you had a sound system at your place in Morgantown, didn't you?
It's not the same.
Oh, it's probably better then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your couch is almost certainly better than mine. My couch sucks, but it's still better than the chairs at the theater in Morgantown.
My couch has got outlets.
Oh,
it depends on what theater you go to.
USB
what do you mean?
ports.
Neither of the theaters are better than my couch.
So I will say, okay, so this is a whole kind of tangent we've gone into, but like it also is a factor of where you live. You guys live in Morgantown, right? So you don't have really.
We have an
any
AMC
nice
theater that's got the reclining seats.
Okay, you do, and I'm familiar with it, right? But it's not comparable to the kinds of theaters you can find elsewhere. Like, so I live near DC now, right? So there are IMAX theaters all around me, and Dolby Vision theaters and stuff. And let me tell you, even the Night Assist at home setup cannot compete with Dolby Vision cinema.
I believe.
I'm sorry, it can't. Like, even like Dolby Vision craps all over IMAX too. Like, if I could see every single blockbuster movie in Dolby Vision, that's how I would.
Does
do
your TV
it, right?
not
like,
do Dolby Vision?
It does,
okay.
right? But like those Dolby Vision theaters, right? Not only do they have like OLED like picture quality, right? But they actually have Atmos speakers everywhere, right? And a true Atmos speaker is installed. It has height channels, right?
Yeah.
So it's installed into the speaker and fires down at you. And so the audio experience when you go into a Dolby Vision theater cannot be matched.
Yeah,
I will die on that.
I agree with you there. And I don't think those theaters are necessarily going to go anywhere because people like those. Like, yeah, I don't see why they would go away. I think the theaters that are going to go away are the ones in Morgantown where, like, they're not good. Nothing about them is good. They're just
good. Yeah,
like,
they're just kind of
and the tickets cost like the same amount, don't they? Like, how much?
A Dolby Vision movie, I think, is like $20.
Oh, okay.
I
was gonna say I see a movie for like $14 here, but
yeah,
still.
But like, I mean, you are getting quality for paying higher. Like you certainly are, right?
Yeah.
Like, I saw Dune in Dolby Vision, and let me tell you, that movie annihilated my senses in the best possible way. Right? Like that blaring soundtrack and the gorgeous. I know you hate sand, Connor, so maybe this is
no. I want to see Dune, but yeah. I do have a problem with deserts.
Well, have fun with Dune.
Yeah. Well, I'll watch it at home where I can take a break.
Yeah.
God, even the desert level in Uncharted wore me out.
I really liked the desert level, man.
It was good, but I was very exhausted by the end of it. I mean, it has the best opening set piece of anything, in my opinion.
So actually, this leads back in a way to The Last of Us, right? So Neil Druckmann, I find Neil Druckmann very interesting, right? So I try to listen to all his interviews. I really like the way he thinks, like I just enjoy listening to the man, right? And he said in an interview, right? Because he's like any creator, well, not like any creator, but like he's the kind of creator who's full of self-doubt and always questioning everything he does, right? He's not James Cameron, where he's just like, I've got the best thing in the world and you're all going to come see it, right?
Yeah.
So Neil Druckmann, he said only twice in his life he felt that they had something incredibly special on their hands, right? Out of the things he's made. One was Uncharted 2, and the other was the HBO Last of Us show. So I think it does speak volumes for him to feel that way about this show.
He didn't feel that way about The Last of Us game. That's like insane. I
mean, obviously he poured everything he had into that game and he was super proud of it. But like, I guess I should clarify, like this is in the context of like being a hit worldwide, right? So like he was just like, when they finished Uncharted 2, he knew like this was going to be massive. Like people are going to like play this and be like, oh my God, like what is this, right? And he feels that way about what they've done with the HBO show as well. So, and if the first 2 episodes are anything to go by, right, like I don't blame him, right? Like this thing is catching fire. Yeah, I'm excited for episode 3. I'm excited for the episodes after that. I'm excited for part 2. I'm ready for the entire internet to be angry again when part 2 releases. Which, yeah, we won't go into spoilers for that here because I know, Connor, you haven't played it. And you should play it when it comes to PC.
Yeah, I will. I will definitely. I don't know. Honestly, this show is like almost tempting me to buy the Last of Us remake, but I just don't. I don't think I'm going to like it as much as
this
the
is
show.
Sony's master plan, right?
Yeah.
Like this is why they made the Last of Us remake.
Yeah.
For this exact reason. Because for every one of you, Connor, there's another person who gave in to the temptation.
No, and they put it, well, like anybody who didn't have a PS3 at the time, you should. Like it's worth playing. I would never tell someone that they shouldn't play and enjoy The Last of Us. That game is good. It's just not buy it a second time good for me.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe if it's like on a Steam sale, I would recommend checking out the remake.
It's like $70.
I think it's out on PC
it is.
now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, PC. That game's really gonna shine on PC because, like, even on PS5, right? Like, you've got 1440p, 60 frames per second, which is
but
great.
4K
Don't get me wrong,
is
but like
look...
with your graphics card, right? Like, you're just going to that's gonna probably be the best looking game you ever played. Like, quite frankly, already, like so.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be honest, I have not. I have the graphics card. I actually the biggest graphically intensive game I've been playing is probably Death Stranding, which frankly is not that. Like it's nothing insane compared to modern day stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, it depends on what you're looking for in graphics, too, because, like, The Last of Us doesn't adopt technologies like ray tracing or anything like that. But, like, what The Last of Us...
It's so stylistically good.
What the Last of Us games do is just cram so much detail into all of its assets, like, and that would visually pop off, with your graphics card.
Yeah.
So, it's not all about ray tracing, folks.
No, I mean, my graphics card isn't that good at ray tracing. It's an AMD, so it's not as good as
right,
NVIDIA.
Yeah. But, honestly, another hot take, I kind of feel like ray tracing is a bit overrated. Like, give me frame rate over ray tracing any
If you can get ray tracing and over 60 FPS in a non-competitive game, I'm probably going to turn it on. Otherwise, no, it's the first to go because it doubles your frame rate to turn it off, and high frame rate just looks so good.
Like, from a PS5 sort of anecdote, right? Like all sorts of games, Sony exclusives come out with like ray tracing 40 frames per second options. I don't even consider that for a second, right?
Yeah.
Like the 60 FPS feels way more next gen to me than like really nice reflections. I'm sorry.
The hardware, and on some level the software, but that's kind of a consequence of the hardware. But even like the 4090, like it's still really not there for ray tracing. Like, there's a tech demo out, Portal RTX, which shows, like, what ray tracing could eventually become.
And it looks incredible.
It looks incredible. But it's still not really there yet, and so like stuff isn't really being designed around it yet, and so like the implementations of RTX we're getting are kind of like a supplement that's kind of nice, but we've gotten so good at just faking all of that stuff with rasterization, traditional rasterization, that like I think there was an Alanis Tech Tips video where they like had their graphics guys come in and like try to tell whether or not ray tracing was even turned on in some of the bigger games at the time. And granted, this was a year or two ago, but only one of them could even tell. And he was like comparing pixels. Like, it's the traditional techniques are so good. I do think ray tracing will be the future at some point. Not only because it looks good, but because those like workarounds and stuff take time to develop and things that ray tracing can help you avoid. But I don't know. I have it on in Fortnite. That's about it, though.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Frame rate over ray tracing any day for me.
I have it on in Fortnite because I can still get like 90 FPS and like...
Man, that's tasty.
Yeah. That's with...
I mean, that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
But like, you don't get the dream unless you have like a 4090.
Yeah.
So...
Yep.
All right. So, any final thoughts on The Last of Us before we get into what we're playing?
It's good. It's very good.
It's very good. It's, and I mean, like, I probably don't even need to be telling you this, right? Like, by the time this comes out, the show has gone viral, right? Even if you haven't played the games, you've heard of the show, right? Like, and if you avoided the games for any reason, I would still recommend give the HBO show a shot, right? Like, this thing is... I hate to use the word because it sounds so pretentious, but this really is like prestige TV. Like they really nailed it.
It's quite good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So because Michael hasn't said a word this episode, why don't you start us off, Mike, with what you've been playing?
Boy, I can't wait to
What have you been
everybody.
playing during this episode?
I've been playing Dwarf Fortress during this entire episode, but I really haven't played any games that I haven't already talked about in a while.
Yeah, wow. I've actually had I've been in a bit of a drought too. We're in kind of a space between big releases. Like there was that Fire Emblem game. I was actually, until you messaged me about that Fire Emblem game, I was about to buy it.
So all right, I guess we're doing this. Okay, so apparently in the new Fire Emblem Engage, you know how like Fire Emblem games have like romance elements, right? Like social elements.
I do.
Apparently in this game you can date an 11-year-old. Which what are you doing, Japan?
I was like on the cusp of like, you know what? Maybe I'll get, this is like a quieter release. Okay, so maybe I'll give Fire Emblem a try.
One comment I have on that: in the English release of the game, they changed that dialogue completely as to hide it.
Okay.
Right. So like,
but did they age her up, or did they remove
No, they just changed the dialogue. So like in the Japanese or whatever where it's saying like, oh, like I'm young, but date me anyway, or some cringy thing like that. It's just like completely different. Like they didn't even translate it. They just made something up and put it there.
That's for the best.
So the English localization sort of hid that from the masses, right?
Yeah.
Which good on them, right? Like that's just, I don't know why that's in the game, man. Like that's just so weird.
Yep.
But so if you were considering purchasing the game, know that, if you play it in English, right, and, even if you play it in Japanese with English subtitles, right, like, unless you understand Japanese, you're not going to be, like, getting that content. So.
Is that the game you've been playing, Amit, or do you have another one?
No, I haven't played Fire Emblem.
Oh, I don't think because you're a big Fire Emblem guy. I thought you'd have played it.
So you call me a big Fire Emblem guy, but the only game in the series I've played is Three Houses.
Oh, but you really liked it, and you told me I needed to play it. Or you told me I really
liked Three Houses. So actually, Three Houses, what it did was it like personified.
Yeah, and I hear this one doesn't. Like, I hear Three Houses has a lot more social stuff than the new one. Yeah,
Three Houses lean more into the social aspect, whereas Engage leans more into the combat and the mechanics. Which, by the way, Fire Emblem combat is very, very good. The strategic combat, but like the social elements are what really won me over in Fire Emblem Three Houses. So I was disappointed to see that. I don't think I'll play Engage. Like I know for some reason you think I'm a huge Fire Emblem fan, but I've only played like one of the games.
I think I'm calling you that just because
So-
you defended the Fire Emblem inclusions.
I did.
in
Fire
Ultimate, and I think they're indefensible.
No. I didn't defend the Fire Emblem inclusions, right? I defended Fire Emblem itself.
Okay.
Right. I did not. I do not think 20 Fire Emblem characters need to be in that game.
I think because of those inclusions, attacked Fire Emblem itself.
Yes,
And so I think I'm
and then I had to
conflating
defend
my loathing of the core product as a result of something totally unrelated with you defending something totally unrelated because you like the core product. And that's on me.
Indeed. So neither of you have games, huh?
No, I have a game.
Okay.
I've been actually getting more into development and stuff recently, but as a result of that, I've gone back to one of the communities I really like, the PICO-8. And I wanted to give them a shout out. The PICO-8, I'm actually going to bring up the spec sheet here so I don't butcher it. But the PICO-8 is what's called a fantasy console. So it is a lot like a console that would have come out in the 80s. And there is an emulator for it, except there's no actual console. The console never existed. So here are the specs here. You have a 128 by 128 16 color display. 32 kilobyte cartridges, 4 sound channels. You code in Lua. There's a CPU spec here, but I don't know what it means. You can have 256 8x8 pixel sprites and 128 by 32 tiles of a tile map. And
so if we're like trying to have like an analog to a real world system, what is this? Like kind of like NES level?
Probably closer to Game Boy Color. But yeah,
Okay.
NES, it's lower resolution than the NES. The NES is, I think, 240p, which is, at least one side of the NES is 240 pixels. I don't know the actual exact resolution. Whereas this is 128 by 128 square. So this is lower resolution than an NES. And the cool thing about a PICO-8 is that the cartridges can be saved into a PNG file. And it looks like a cartridge. Like it just looks like like you have a screenshot on the front of it. It looks like a little cartridge, but you can actually load that PNG where it's so small. The games are only 32 kilobytes. You can load that PNG into a PICO-8 and you can play the game. And also
That's so cool.
vast majority of these games are free. There are a few paid games, but there's something called the Cartverse, which is like, I don't actually know how. I think you only have to pay for PICO-8 if you want to develop on it. I'm not really sure. You can get the PICO-8 emulator is $15. It's $14.99. I think it goes on sale sometimes. And you can type in the word Splore into the console on it. And it brings up the current top games. You can look at new games. You can look at the most recent PICO-8 Jam games. You can look at work in progress games. And the other cool thing is that any time while you're playing a game, you can actually look at the code. Like, you can look at the cartridge.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and you can go in and make changes. Yeah. So,
what a wild
every
idea.
game on it is essentially open source.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so it's a very fun, there's an educational edition of the PICO-8 out, which just makes sense. It's a cool educational thing. I don't know, like, a lot of people use this to learn game development, and I don't know if that really makes sense, because it is like it has like kind of arbitrary challenges that I don't know if I would put on a new game developer. But some of those challenges, in my opinion, actually make it easier. Like, I find lower resolution pixel art easier to do, and I also like you're not going to get stun locked by color choice because you only have 16 colors to begin with. There's a simplicity to it that is nice.
Yeah, and there is something to be said about like constraints.
Yeah.
Inspiring.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
creativity.
one of the nice things about PICO-8 is like because of its 16 color, and those are 16 fixed colors. You don't get to choose those colors, and as a result of that, you can tell a PICO-8 game just by looking at it because of the resolution and the color palette restrictions. And it's pretty cool. People have made some incredible stuff on it. There's you can do 3D on it. People have made Doom clones and stuff. But it's largely, games that look like they're from the 80s. It's very cool.
I was gonna say, would it even be a console if it didn't have a Doom clone?
Exactly. It's called Poom, if anybody wants to look it up. And all the games, like, I don't think you can access Splore, but you can access the PICO-8 forums, I think, and, like, actually look around and play these games. There's a lot of them on itch.io and stuff that you can run PICO-8 in the browser as well, which is neat.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's so lightweight.
It's so lightweight,
course,
yeah. And
yeah.
it's There's also like a challenge. People do what's called a tweet cart, which is trying to put an entire PICO-8 cartridge into a tweet, 280 characters without an image, and you would just copy paste the tweet into your PICO-8 and see what happens. It's usually not a game. It's usually just like a visual experience, an audiovisual experience, but it's still neat. I really like it. And the game I wanted to shout out from the PICO-8 is, oh crap, I just had it up. I think it's called Freezing Nights. Yeah, Freezing Nights. And it's a little RPG that plays like Mario and Luigi games, the Game Boy RPGs. Like it's a turn-based RPG, but you actually like jump and dodge attacks and stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's super fun. And that's the kind of stuff you're going to find. And that's like another thing I like about it. I put it on my Steam Deck the other day. And a lot of the games you can play start to finish in less than 10 minutes because they have to be so small, 10 or 20 minutes. And I think that's really neat. I highly recommend the PICO-8.
I wonder how they like managed a 10 to 20 minute RPG. You know, that genre in particular is traditionally
the Freezing Nights
long.
is not 10 to 20 minutes. Freezing Nights is actually fairly long. It's
okay.
You can do what's called a multi-cart game, which is at the end of your cartridge, you have a command to load a new cartridge, and you can make a game pretty long that way. The problem is at least every individual scene is going to have to fit in a cartridge, I believe. I don't think you can like stream a game that way to totally get around the limitations. But I think Freezing Nights, every single battle is its own cartridge, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
Yeah, so it is very high detail and stuff.
Literally duct taping multiple Game Boys together.
Poom is also the Doom clone is many cartridges.
Yeah.
As you can imagine.
That's really cool. I'll have to check this out.
Yeah, I'm shocked you didn't hear about it when we were in the Game Developers Club. I thought I did a meeting on it, but it might have.
Man, yeah, my memory isn't what it used to be, man.
Yeah, but it's extremely cool. The PICO-8 is just very fun. And if you bought the I believe it was in the itch.io Racial Justice Bundle. So if you bought that, you probably already have PICO-8. I think. I could be wrong about that. All right.
Got anything else?
Nope. That's all. I've just kind of been doing development other than that, which is nice. It is, I'm not ready to talk about what I'm making yet, but it is nice to like feel that drive again. I haven't in a couple of years.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And we'll have to do an episode on your game when it's nearing completion and or finished.
Might not wait till completion. Might wait till I have a prototype out. Because I might actually release a prototype on this one. But yeah, I'll pass on.
Okay, I originally wasn't going to do anything, but due to the lack of games in this section, I guess I can talk about One Piece Odyssey.
Oh, you played it?
So, I did play it, and I am enjoying it, but it is not a great game.
Okay, that was what was making me really... I saw a ton of people that were huge One Piece fans saying that it's Dragon Quest XI, but One Piece, and I was like,
yes.
But is it? Because Dragon Quest XI was really good. Here's
the thing. I actually have not played a Dragon Quest game. I've heard a lot about Dragon Quest, so I imagine that this is what it's like, right?
To me, the gameplay looked like very similar to Dragon Quest XI, but not... The little stuff wasn't quite there enough to make me think I would enjoy it.
But here's the best way I can put it, right? Like, I'm enjoying this game because I love One Piece. Like, if this game was not One Piece, I don't think I would play it, right?
Yeah. Well, then part of me only enjoyed Dragon Quest because it's Toriyama, so...
Yeah.
So it's basically Dragon Ball.
I mean, I guess I can talk... The One Piece-y elements are all there, and probably the strongest they've ever been in a video game, right? They've got all the crew voiced, right?
Really?
Like, and yeah, everyone's talking in Japanese, right? So it's only Japanese. You can only play it with Japanese with English subtitles. But, they got all the actors on the show to play their voices. And this is a long RPG, right? Like, we're talking like dozens of hours.
I've heard you spend almost 8 hours in Alabasta alone, which is another reason.
Oh my god, I'm still in Alabasta.
I didn't buy it because I didn't think I could handle 8 hours of desert.
Yeah, so...
As we've mentioned.
But like, talking about the pros, right? So, you got the iconic One Piece voice actors, and what's wonderful about the game is that like Oda was definitely involved to some capacity because the Straw Hat banter is there.
Yeah, they're
all like talking to each other and bouncing off each other, and that's just a wonderful thing to see. Like whether it be in like manga or anime or games, just seeing the Straw Hats exist makes me happy, right? And another thing I gotta praise is the attacks, right? Like there's kind of like a rock paper scissors damage system where like strength type characters beat technique type characters beat range type characters.
What did they
beat
call
strength
Zoro?
type characters. Zoro is a technique type.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Okay, so okay. First major omission, and I guess spoilers for One Piece or whatever, but Jinbei is not on the crew in this game, which is a tragedy.
It takes place. I believe it takes place.
It takes place vaguely like
it's between Dressrosa and Whole Cake Island, so Jinbei wouldn't be there yet. Yeah.
So I guess we can go through the types.
Yeah,
so
but it's weird that Sanji's
Luffy, Chopper, and Sanji are strength types. Zoro, Robin, and Brook are technique types. And then Usopp, Nami, and Frankie are range types.
Nami is a range type and not a technique type. Interesting.
Yeah,
does Nami have Zeus?
Not yet. She might get him later.
Yeah, I guess she wouldn't have. No, she can't because it takes place before Whole Cake Island.
One thing that happens, right? So in the game, right, like you could tell that there was some level of effort put into like, what does this make sense, right? Because like the Straw Hats at this point in the story would have been able to steamroll anything on this island. You know, like, oh no, a giant crab, like who cares, right? Like
they forgot their techniques. Yeah,
but what happens is like they lose their powers basically, and they have to like start back from scratch, right? So like at my point in the game, like Luffy only has like 3 or 4 attacks, can't use the gears or anything because I'm still in Alabasta. Which, you know, it makes sense, right? Like when you're fighting like bandits or whatever and have to like exert any modicum of effort to defeat them. But that's another thing I will say, you know, for the first several hours, the game was way too easy.
It's the whole game. It never gets hard from what I've heard.
There is a little difficulty spike in Alabasta, but it's like nothing really, right? Like it's still like it went from like literally you could be asleep playing this game to maybe you'll have to heal occasionally. That's the level of difficulty spike I'm thinking of, right? And like at first I thought that was like, okay, I think Dragon Quest games are like that too. So like maybe like that's just the sort of vibe, right? Like just a sort of chill RPG.
They're not,
but it's
really.
just like it's just like too much in this game. Yeah.
Dragon Quest within the first like 4 hours, I think I was dying a few times. The Dragon Quest. Okay, now, granted, I'm not that great, but
that's not going to happen in this game, like at all. Right, like, and I do hear there's like a couple difficulty spikes later on, so I hope like it actually gets a little harder. Right?
Can I spoil one thing that's not in the game that kind of makes me sad?
Sure.
No Skypiea.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so I think
that's a glaring.
So the way it
omission
works,
for me.
right? So let me just break it down. Right, so the Straw Hats arrive on this island called Wofford, and it actually has like Skypiean influences on it. Like one of the which is baffling to me, right? Like there is no Skypiea because they like literally talk about Skypiea like when they get there.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
That's annoying to me.
But you explore this island, right? You're trying to get your powers back and stuff, and you have this girl who could basically have you like plunge into your memories to get some of your powers back. So the game is interspersed right between like the Wofford, like the island exploration sections, and the memories, which are like arcs from the series, right? So obviously Alabasta is the first one. So I'm not too far into the game, but my God, like so much backtracking in Alabasta, so much like running around doing nonsense. It's just like, let's get to the exciting parts here. Cause like Alabasta as a story is wonderful. Like I love the whole like rebellion and all that, defeating Crocodile. I haven't seen any of that yet. It's just like running around doing meaningless.
Yep, I hear there's a lot
tasks.
of running back and forth too. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not really fun. But like I feel like if they condensed this game a lot, it would be a lot better.
Yeah.
Right? But like I said, you know, like the actual exploration, the RPG elements, not that great. But
you get
by
fast
virtue
travel
of
at
it
some
being
point.
Yeah, and I can tell like there's like signs or whatever that the characters can't use yet for fast travel. But like the virtues of the game come from being One Piece, right? Like it's cool, like using Luffy's powers to like stretch and like go get something, right? Or like swing through the air, like snap to like a cliff edge, right? It's cool using, and they do little things like with each of the Straw Hats in the world that are unique to them. Like there's certain areas only Chopper can enter because he's so little, right? And Sanji can detect like ingredients around, and you can use those ingredients to cook food, which if the game was difficult, that would be important, right? Usopp can like shoot things down, like and you can collect them, like for like crafting things, and you can craft. Usopp can craft things for you, and Nami can detect money in the overworld, and like little things like that, you know, like makes it unique playing as each Straw Hat. And who knows, there might be even more of that stuff because I'm still like relatively early on in the game. Oh yeah, what else? The combat, right? So you have all Straw Hats with you at all times, but only 4 can enter combat at a time, right? So there are good ideas in the combat system, right? Like, because like I mentioned that rock paper scissors style like weakness system, but there's also this concept of like zones, right? So like when you start combat, like Luffy and 2 enemies can be here, and then like Zoro and Chopper and like an enemy could be in another section, and Robin and like another enemy could be in another section, for example, right? And where your characters are positioned actually affects like who you can fight and stuff, right? Because like some of your attacks are range only, some of them are short range only, some of them are short and long range. So you have to sometimes do a bit of like position switching to get the optimal effect, to be able to attack who you want with the character you want to attack them with. So that's all really cool, but like it's all kind of just blown away by how easy the game is. Like there is like meaningful strategic choices to be made here, but like none of them actually matter, which sucks, you know? Like if they made the game more difficult, like the combat would shine more, but unfortunately it doesn't really do that.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I think I'm going to keep playing it for now, at least, just like to get, you know, doses of One Piece. But like, it's not a game that I'm like itching to complete or anything. And that's a shame, right? Because like it looked pretty promising to me, just like from the outside looking in before the game came out.
I'm glad you bought it and not me, because I was like,
Yeah.
I had my finger on the trigger a few times. And I just decided I don't have time for a big RPG right now. But
I think I would give it like, if we're using the full scale here, right? I think I would give it like a 6 out of 10.
that's
Elevated to a 7
Okay.
for One Piece.
yeah.
Right? But like obviously, like I don't know, like there could be moments where it gets better in the game, could be moments where it gets worse, but that's kind of where it is right now. Like, and granted, you know, I'm only in Alabasta, and I think they do like Alabasta, Water 7,
Marineford is in there, yeah.
and Dressrosa.
And Water 7 has to include an East Lobby, right? Like,
yeah, no, certainly,
Yeah.
yeah, that's like the whole point.
and then Dressrosa,
So-
yeah. Which,
Although I will say, like Alabasta, I guess environment-wise is a little boring to explore, like especially because like
'Cause it's a
the
big desert.
towns like Alubarna and stuff were fun actually to explore because like the architecture is all there and there's actually people like walking around and stuff, and that's neat to see, right? Water 7 is probably going to be stunning.
Water
right?
7 is going to be insane, yeah.
Imagine exploring Water 7. That's going to be phenomenal, right? Like so.
and
I'm very
Marineford
much-
will also be, like, nuts. I mean, from what I've heard, you don't get to do a lot of exploring, which makes sense. I think it's just like a series of boss
Marineford's
battles.
like a war. So yeah, I mean that makes sense. Yeah.
But
But I
visually
hope,
spectacular.
You know, it's actually like difficult. So, and like there's no denying that the production values are actually quite high in this game, which is surprising. You know, like the characters look really good and like the animations are very good. That's the most surprising part. Like the animations are quite solid in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, it looked
like
good
when
from the
Luffy
videos I watched.
uses his attacks and stuff. It looks just like the manga. It looks just like the show. So I don't know. Really kind of mixed bag. I kind of wish it was better, but it's not like bad enough to completely put me off. So I guess it's doing something right.
Yeah, but are you going to finish it with, like, some of the
I don't
games
know,
that are
man.
coming up in the next few
Yeah,
months?
I don't know if I'm gonna. Yeah. So like, man, I guess we could briefly just mention, right? Like, you know, the Dead Space remake comes out soon, and I've never actually played Dead Space, so I'm probably gonna be all over that.
Crazy year for space games, dude. Kerbal Space Program
Starfield,
2.
Kerbal Space Program,
2 comes out next, I think a month from today, I think.
PSVR 2 releases in less than a month.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
That's gonna be huge for me. I'm definitely gonna talk all about that after I get it and like.
I did read that that's
lose
almost
myself in
certainly
there.
not going to be cracked for PC, though. The guy who cracked the PSVR 1
Yeah,
said it's
I did
probably
see
not
that.
going to happen. And that sucks.
That's unfortunate.
Because it is kind of a ball-in headset, and I'm not going to be able to use it. I don't know what the
Yeah.
because Windows Mixed Reality is gone. That's what I have, and I don't even know that my headset's days are numbered at this point, firmware-wise.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about that in our sort of like the state of like 2023 gaming episode,
Yeah.
but like I was shocked to see that news. Like Microsoft totally nixed all efforts.
I was shocked to see the
for
HoloLens
VR
go.
and mixed reality.
Windows
and
mixed
stuff like that,
reality has
yeah.
not gotten any love in like 5 years, so that's not.
But that's just like nope, we do not believe in the future of this thing.
Yeah.
We are going to focus elsewhere, which is not what Sony is doing. So we'll see.
Well, they never
Who's
were.
right.
They never did focus in their gaming division. Like,
Yeah.
so I don't know. Well, yeah, we'll get into that another time. You're right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's it for me, and that is going to be it for us. Thank you, Connor and Mike.
Yeah. See you guys next week.
See you next week. Bye.